Welcome to the final Day at Indy podcast prior to the race. We're going to try to do one after the race, but can't promise based on either workload or we might all just be asleep. But this is the Marshall Pruett podcast presented by Cooper Tires and supported this month by our friends at Bell Racing Helmets USA. I'm here with one of our steady friends, Mike Hull, Managing Director of Chip Ganassi Racing. Mike, we just 20 minutes out from completing Carb Day, final hour of practice, knowing how kind you are in giving fans insights on fuel windows and strategy ideas. I figure having just finished Carb Day might be perfect to get some insights from you. Before we get to strategy and such for Sunday, though, let's talk about the session that just closed, and if there's anything we might glean from it, might take from it. Tony Kanaan, fastest speed overall at 227.7. Right behind him, some guy you know a little bit about, Scott Dixon, your driver. Marco Andretti behind him, Sebastian Bourdais, Charlie Kimball in fifth. A pretty good spread of Chevys and Hondas. If there's one thing that's a little bit troubling, possibly, Mike, it's Tony Kanaan almost 2 miles an hour up on anybody. We can assume that's a monster tow. But any big takeaways, either how certain teams might be looking, manufacturers might be looking?
Yeah, I don't know. First of all, if you're a NASCAR fan instead of an IndyCar fan, I know most of the people listening to this are IndyCar fans, you'd look at the top 10 and top 20 laps. You'd look at the average speed. We do that when we go back engineering-wise and look at the speeds to see what the average speed was through a run of, say, 10 laps. We were impressed today with what Scott did during that phase. Not so much the highest speed that you talked about, but you'd probably be more interested in what Tony or Marco or Sebastian or Scott or anybody did for a 10-lap run. We thought our 10-lap runs, which we did 3 of them, we thought they were pretty good. Because that's really what's going to make the difference for you on a long green run, maintaining that track position that you have to hold through the stop. So we were good there. Everybody gets a tow. Let's face it. They should rename this place Tow City. But it's more about what you do after you get that tow lap that really counts.
If we're looking at the race, Mike, would assume that part of what you and your team and every team is working on, that mindset of a 10-lap run, a longer run to get a feel, simulate what's going to happen in the race, running in that tow, would assume everybody's working on trying not to necessarily put up the biggest peak speed, but then possibly have some significantly lower speeds on that 10 or 15, however many lap run. What's the mindset of trying to get your race engineers and even your driver to buy into, we want the best average? So maybe the car doesn't feel magic, but if it's good, that's not a bad thing. Well,
you're doing 2 things. I think you're trying to do that. You could hope there's some kind of an eclipse and you just get out front. You could just run those laps all by yourself, but that's not what happens in this race. I think everybody is cognizant of the fact that they have to find a way to get underneath people and pass them cleanly. And that's maybe a slight variation from what we've done in the past year with the previous Aero Kit. The previous Aero Kit seemed to be able to you could suck up from a distance and gain momentum to pass. This Aero Kit doesn't give you that opportunity. It's okay in the draft, but it doesn't create the momentum in the same way the one that it replaced did. So I think most people that are working on the race were working on getting underneath people, tuning the front of their cars so that the car would turn well without being washed out, and then be able to have that momentum at a closer distance to their neighbor instead of a longer distance. And that's probably the difference. I think most people, if you watched practice, the 4 real practice days when people were working on race things, that's what they did. We had Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday of practice, and then we had last Monday, so 4 days. We thought we got it right 2.5 out of those 4 days, to be honest about it. Maybe that's good. We thought we got it really, really good today again, so maybe we'll add that as a whole day. That's what this race is going to be all about.
We've heard from drivers, and we've spoken about this a little bit, but it would be great to revisit. Adding to what you mentioned Mike, about the difference in the physical phenomena of a toe, getting some sort of draft to try and gain a spot. The difference does seem to continue to be one where you can still have a pretty, a nice hole punched in the air. You can, get drawn up to the car in front of you, but it seems like if you have multiple cars in front, the amount of turbulence that's coming off is still enough to where there's, I've had some drivers describe it almost like a wall, or somewhat like a wall, compared to, boy, I got that run and I can just sweep around. Is that something you're still hearing from your driver?
We do hear that, and here's what's going to happen. Here's what you're going to hear in the race if you're on the two-way radio with the driver. If he's in that lead group and you're swimming along fine, the driver's going to tell you how great the car is. The same car, when it leaves the pit lane, as it sits 5-10 spots back, he's going to say to you on the radio, what did you just do to the car? And it's going to feel like the worst car that he or she have ever driven. And so that's probably the difference. The reality of this race has always been it's been 6 or 7 stops, 24 to 25 laps a stop. With the fuel mileage, both Chevrolet and Honda are now getting, it could be as many as 29 laps.
Wow.
Maybe. It's hard to say. I don't think you want to be the last of the brave people sitting out there on that lap in case it goes yellow. But you could probably go a little further. But the reality is if you're in the top 6 in the race, you probably won't lose a lap when you pit under green. Anything from 7th back, you probably will. Now, you can get the lap back when it goes yellow by sequencing up and doing a pass around. But then guess what that does to you? 2 things. It puts you back on the lead lap. But secondly, it puts you back in the pack of all those people that are creating all that turbulence.
Yeah.
So I think you have to be cognizant of that when you're racing and not get knots in your stomach about that. You just have to be patient with it. It's going to be survival of the fittest.
I know that for you, Mike, as you have espoused for as long as I've known you, you try and bring a linear perspective to racing, right? Things might change, could be a new car, engine, driver, whatever it is. You still try to apply that same mindset that you know works. Curious if or how this new Universal Aero Kit in super speedway trim might change how you would coach up your drivers, or how you think any other team would coach up their drivers with some of the aforementioned passing issues, the instability we've heard of as well. How might you go into Sunday's race with any different message on how to get through it?
I think what's in common is race day is what we live to do. It's race day. And you have to accept what it gives you, and on the fly, you have to make adjustments. The minimal adjustments you can make in the pit lane, but the large adjustments that are made by drivers who understand clearly how to create the angle of attack for each of the corners given what they have on that particular day. I think the angle for exit is created at the entrance of the corner. And at Indianapolis, the less you lift, or if you don't lift at all, you still have to create enough angle to where you don't have to continue to turn the front wheels, which slows you down.
Yeah.
And maybe a fan would understand it this way. If they're at a lake somewhere or at the Pacific Ocean, which we both love, and they take a rock and they skip that rock across the racetrack, every time it finds the water, it slows down until it sinks. And that's almost what happens when you come off the corner in one of these cars. The more you turn the front wheels, the slower you go. And the longer it takes to gain that momentum back. So that's the balance the driver has to create. The driver has to create the angle at the front end of the corner so that he's almost turning to the right at the exit, which is kind of scary to think about, but that's the reality of it.
Let me add in here, Mike, we're getting to the final opportunities to mention this, that today's podcast and the entire month of May's podcast has been additionally supported by our friends at Bell Racing Helmets USA, proven since 1956. Bell helmets have been the choice of champions when it comes to state-of-the-art head protection designed for professional and amateur drivers. Bell is synonymous with safety, innovation, performance, and engineering excellence. And to learn more about Bell helmets, visit bellracing.com. Sunday, my friend, the current forecast is 93 nasty degrees. Another thing we've spoken about consistently during this month, man, the podcast, is how temperature sensitive this aero package is at the Speedway, because the downforce numbers aren't incredibly high. We've moved a greater responsibility for downforce production to the floor of the car, the underwing. And with that hot air sitting there on the track surface, we have a little bit thinner air than maybe desired going beneath the car. So high temps could be a place where we have drivers with sore wrists from having to stay on top of that steering wheel. Is that another concern or another advisory point you bring into a pre-race strategy meeting? Hey, temperature could be that this heat could be something that might have us dialing down the bravery a little bit. I hope the drivers as well as the people going over the wall don't start working out this afternoon for the first day in their lives. I think they're fit in both vocational categories. What's really good about what we're doing presently is the tires are able to withstand the heat that we're going to have on Sunday. You shouldn't have tires depending on, it's a relative situation where you are in a relative situation in the field at the speed you're traveling. You shouldn't suddenly find tires that are not underneath you anymore. That will help. Everybody's going to be at a different speed. The whole idea is to keep that different speed consistent from the front end, let's say for 24 laps. That's what you want. And I think the concern really is that you make the right choices, or you make the right choices when you pit the first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth time. Because in truth, what you're trying to do is keep yourself in the race, so at the end of the race you can make the right tuning decision. That's really what you're trying to do. And we've raced here when it felt like it was going to snow, and we didn't get any tire temperature to speak of, and we've raced here when it's been like this. That's why they hold the race. We're going to find out if the decisions that IndyCar made with the Aero Kit are right, and we're going to find out if the decisions that all the teams made to set up for 90-degree weather are correct. Your team obviously is aligned with Honda. You've been part of the Chevy family as well. Looking at how qualifying played out, we had 7 of the 9 Fast 9 qualifiers from the bow tie. As we mentioned at the outset, we have a fairly good mix looking here at the top 10 between both brands. I've had 1 or 2 leading Honda drivers tell me that at least during Monday's practice, they had some of the better bow tie drivers just essentially drive by them. Have you gotten any input from your drivers as to whether you think, at least in race trim, this might be a better fight between the brands, or do you think there might still be that trend out of qualifying where one might have a little bit of an advantage to use?
I don't think we know. We can look at it and we can kind of needle ourselves into what we think might be the reality of the situation. But here's what I think quality teams work on, whether they have a Honda engine or they have a Chevrolet engine. They work on the long run. They work on getting their car correct for those runs. Let's face it, Chevrolet and Honda are both going to have a big advance switch in their cars toward the end of the race that they're going to use. Maybe that's when we're going to see that. I don't think we're going to see that for the first part of the race. We may see speeds faster in one car than another, but these engines have to run at least all the way through Road America that are in the car now. They'll go back in once they come out after the race, and you need to save some of that advance for those races. So if you sit out there, it kind of gives an advantage to the one-off guys as opposed to the full-season guys, because the one-off guys are running. The engine comes out, he goes back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's any one-off people that fall in the category of being able to win the race or not. I think there probably are. But we're not going to concentrate on that. We're going to concentrate on what we've been doing, and that is getting the car the best it can be to keep ourselves in the race all day long.
Let's start to wind down, Mike, on a couple of the tuning options that might be available or will be available to your team. So obviously with the aerodynamics, you have the front wing adjuster. It's centrally mounted. It affects the entire front wing, right? There's no longer the adjusting each side individually. That one is fairly quick. We see that happen quite often during pit stops. Rear wing can be done. Takes a little, maybe not as easy. You actually need to use a wrench to either add or reduce downforce. From what I've heard, aerodynamically, most teams are planning to go in with just about all you can bolt onto the car. That being said, if Scott or Ed Jones is saying, hey, I don't just want a little bit of tire pressure change, but we might need to make something significant aero change-wise, is that something you think you guys have enough adjustment range left to do?
I think you might see people after maybe the second, maybe going to the third stop of the race, you might see people trying that to see what they can get away with for the end of the race, but they'll probably go back and save it for the end. Or they may just say, you know what, that's all we got. Let's just race the way that we're going to have to race. Because I really think that you have to maintain a mechanical balance of the race car. The cross weight, the weight as it moves across the axles as you go in the corner is probably going to determine more your lap time consistently. And we don't think you should concentrate so fully on the aero side of the car that you forget how important the mechanical balance is going to be through a tire run. And I think you might see more emphasis on that from the teams that's probably not publicly displayed than you have in the past.
So we're getting into race day here. We know the temperatures are going to be up, as we mentioned. Any thoughts or concerns about yellows and crashes? Part of your job and every strategist's job is to look at historical trends, right? How many yellows, when have they fallen traditionally? In light of the downforce questions, of whether there's enough for drivers to be truly comfortable, do you think we might see that average go up at all?
Well, I don't know. I think the average is 25%. It's right in that range. Every yellow takes 4 to 5 laps to get back to green, which seems like a long time, but by the time they get everybody organized, they do the pass around, they get everybody back together, they open the pit lane, everybody comes in, everybody goes out, they sweep the racetrack. It's about that long. I think there was only one year in the last several years where the yellows fell to where, in our case, we pitted under every yellow 7 times. That was in 2008. Other than that, the yellows haven't always seemed to fall, and they always seem to fall on lap 155 or 6 or 7, which is too early. And we always say, well, we got to take it. And then you have that cat and mouse game that goes on with one guy trying to save the fuel and another guy saying, screw it, I'm going to go for it. We saw Dan Weldon do that and win the race. We saw Rossi do it the other way. And both of their faces are on the trophy. And you work to win the race as you see fit. The thing that we do not like about the fact that people go slow at the end is that the steward here, the previous steward, and I hope this steward looks at the rule of whatever that percentage, 109 or 110%, you have to maintain that speed.
Yeah.
And that needs to happen so that you see people racing at speed for the win at the end of the race. I think you still need to maintain good speed to win the Indy 500. That's my personal opinion. I don't take away anybody, and including myself as a strategist, when you sit down and figure out how you might have to win the race. But I think that the people in race control need to control the race in that way. And I don't think in the past they've done a good job of that. And the reason, in fairness, is there's so much going on. There's so many people running at different speeds, and they're up there trying to figure out, is that guy, is that driver having a problem? Is that just the speed they're doing at the end of the race? We can't black flag 10 people. But I think they have to be cognizant of the fact that race fans, 350,000 race fans here on race day want to see the fastest person win the race.
Amen to that. With the coasting to the finish line, we'll go ahead and try and give up that theme. Hopefully it'll be like the Indy Lights races we have here, where it's 3 or 4 wide and they're separated by a trillionth of a second. So that is our dream. Well, Mr. Hull, I think folks have a better idea on potential fuel window stint, some ideas on how much roughly percentage-wise we're going to look at for minimum for cautions, possibly have more, and 93 degrees on race day. It is going to be a true endurance test here at Indianapolis. And,
well, I think Sunday night we might jump in the pool.
If we were smart, we'd get that pool down on pit lane right now and dip our toes in there immediately. Well, sir, thank you as always, and look forward to catching up with you after the race here. And thanks again for listening to The Day at Indy on the Marshall Pruett podcast, presented by Cooper Tires, and also supported this month by Bell Racing Helmets USA.